The long-awaited return to platforming goodness has finally arrived in the shape of Yooka-Laylee. I'm pretty sure just about everybody's up to speed on this game by now, but just in case you're somehow not, essentially what happened is the people from Rare that made Banjo-Tooie and Banjo-Kazooie, they quit Rare years ago and made a new company called Playtonic Games. They then went on Kickstarter and launched an extremely successful crowdfunder campaign to fund a brand new game that would be a spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie. This was none other than Yooka-Laylee, a collectathon buddy platformer. To everyone's surprise, it released a very lukewarm review, some critics giving it terrible scores. Even YouTubers I love and trust didn't seem to like it.
I'm very disappointed with this game.
It seemed it just didn't live up to the hype. It wasn't the legendary revival of the platformer genre that everyone was hoping for. And that's why I wanted to play the game for myself, because, you know, I'm the platformer man. I'm all about those B-grade platformers, the ones like Vex and Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. Even back then, these games were always released to mediocre to lukewarm reviews, and I find I personally can be a lot more generously optimistic when it comes to these kinds of games. So since everybody seems to be getting let down by going in with such high expectations, I'm gonna be going in a lot more cautiously optimistic. And I do have very mixed feelings about the game. I mean, they're not entirely bad, but they're not entirely good either, so why don't we get started? But first and foremost, a huge shout out to Brian Diaz for throwing a free PS4 code for Yooka-Laylee my way. Thank you so much, dude. I got the game for free from him. I didn't have to pay for it. Hell yeah, this game review has been made possible by you. Thank you so much. Yooka-Laylee starts off with something I don't really like. It's this long, unskippable cutscene. The problem with it is that the text scrolls by way too slowly, and it makes the dialogue drag on and on and on. But anyway, once you're finally past that, we're in control, and it does not take long to notice that these controls are really dang good. Yooka maneuvers tightly, but fluidly. Right off the bat, I found myself landing precise jumps with total ease. It took me no time at all to get used to it. If you played Banjo-Kazooie, you know what to expect. The game lands you in the villain's lair, serving as the hub world, and within the hub world, you'll find the odd collectible here and there, but mainly portals to the main stages. Every stage will require a certain amount of collectibles to open up. You know, stars, jiggies, golden bananas. You guys know this. Yooka and Laylee find themselves collecting what are called pages, pages that were torn out of Laylee's magical book. The villain, capital B, is trying to take all the books or whatever because he's some corporate overlord, and I don't know, you know, I wasn't really paying attention the entire time, but it's a cute plot with some great characters. Yooka and Laylee are just fantastic. The colors work, the designs work, the villains aren't half bad either, honestly. I really like the duck dude, Quackers, but my favorite of the bunch has to be Trouser, a snake wearing a pair of pants. Not gonna lie, this is some grade A character design. Think of Trouser like Bottles from Banjo-Kazooie. He's gonna be the one learning in new moves, which are exchanged for feathers, which every level has plenty of. You know, like the music notes from Banjo. One thing I love about the feathers, this is classic game design. There's so many of them in every level, and they're always laid out in a way that guides the player to areas of interest. It's not uncommon to climb to a high area and see some places off in the distance with some feathers kicking around. This way you can easily tell which areas you haven't visited yet, so even if you're feeling a tad disoriented or overwhelmed by the level's massive size, you can always count on the feathers to lead the way. I've always considered this great game design. Mario's always done it with coins, Sonic to a lesser extent with rings, and Yooka-Laylee pulls it off well too. The first level is a tropical theme world. It's definitely a lot bigger in scale than Banjo-Kazooie's first stage. Honestly, I might even say it's a little bit too big for a first stage, but nonetheless, it is the classic open world platforming collectathon adventure action you've been waiting for all these years, and it's good. At least, it's mostly good. There's always a series of objectives throughout the stage. It could be as simple as climbing a tower and finding the pagey on top, or it could involve doing something for an NPC. You might race this cloud dude, or fight back some goblins for the skeleton dude, or find a gem for the Shovel Knight dude. Wow, Shovel Knight is in the game? What a gas! Do I really have to pretend to be surprised? I mean, like, they showed this off on social media months before the game was even released. It would have been nice if they kept it like a surprise, so it would have been a surprise. Anyway, the game suffers from the exact same problem a lot of B-grade platformers I've reviewed have, most notably Vex and Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. The problem is not every pagey is fun to get. It seems for every 3 or 4 fun pages, there's one that's either not so fun or maybe just a bit tedious, or one that's just downright terrible and frustrating. Take these minecart stages, god, they're so dumb. Not only do you need to get to the end of the stage in one piece, but you also have to collect a certain amount of gems along the way. If you don't have enough gems by the end, you'll have to do the whole thing over. It's so dumb. And it's not insanely difficult, but it's definitely annoying and will take numerous attempts to memorize the track first. And it's not just the one time either. There's one of these in every single stage. Every single level has one of these cart sections. Good lord. Anytime the game tries to have you do some sort of mini game, it'll always range from boring to downright frustrating. Then there's these quote-unquote arcade games you can play for pages. I mean, it sounds like a great idea, but the games themselves are just terrible mini games reusing the game's assets, smashing everything into like a kart racer or a shooter, a track runner, complete with bulky controls and stressful completion requirements. I know Banjo-Tooie had these mini games too, but they were nothing like this. Yooka-Laylee requires 100 of the 145 pages to complete the game, and that means you will find yourself fulfilling many of the game's more frustrating objectives in order to advance. You will be able to ignore some of them. I mean, with 45 extra pages, there is some wiggle room to avoid the objectives you don't really like, but even still, there's enough of them to bog down the experience time to time. When it's bad, Yooka-Laylee can be downright frustrating, but when it's good, it is good. I mean, learning new moves from Trouser is always exciting. Your moveset is always expanding, giving you the means to meet more and more objectives, collecting more and more pages. It's a formula dating all the way back to Banjo, learning new moves to progress, and personally, I think it still works just as well all these years later. You know that feeling of getting stronger you get from RPGs? This formula has always emulated that well for me, but it's satisfying in a way that I feel more and more capable, rather than stronger. You know, it feels really good to know that you can now do more. Oh man, and every move reflects the choice in characters remarkably well. A chameleon and a bat both have great potential, like Laylee's sonar for activating objects, or Yuka's tongue for grabbing ledges, Laylee's wings for flight, perhaps the most creative being Yuka's abilities to blend with his environment, being a chameleon and all, absorbing the properties of metal to make you heavier, resistant to wind, or honey to make you sticky, keeping you from sliding on ice. Some moves don't always work super well though. I found the tongue grapple move to be a little unresponsive at times. I mean, it usually works, but the odd occasion where it didn't definitely raised a couple eyebrows. Another problem I have with the game is scale. Definitely scale. Some levels are just way too big. I mean, the first level's great, but level 2 is where I started to feel overwhelmed. Look at all of this space. It's quite a bit intimidating, and it takes forever to get from one place to another. A bigger level isn't necessarily a better level. I would argue that something smaller, to the point, and concise is definitely better than something large and aimless, and I'm not gonna lie, much of this level does seem a tad aimless. There's this one page you have to get by turning into a snowplow and finding all these snowman's hats, and the level's just so big and the snowmen are so spread far apart, like, forget it, it's just too much work. It's not fun when it feels like a chore, you know? Due to the large level size, you're gonna be using the roll move a lot. You'll use this one for climbing steeper slopes or, you know, just generally going faster. And this is where another thing I hate about this game comes into play. The special move meter. For whatever reason, I thought it'd be a good idea to limit how much you can use your special moves. There's no reason to limit something like that. It's so frustrating to just want to get to the other side of the map because it will always run out before you get there. Luckily, there's a tonic that'll make it use less power. Yeah, there's these tonics you can get from this weird, terrifying fridge lady? You unlock them by doing various things, you know, collect so much of this, do so much of that, you'll get a tonic. It's kinda like a cheat code? No, it's more like a stat upgrade, like rolling uses less energy, or +1 heart, you know, it's all stuff like that, but you only get to equip one at a time? Why can't I just equip them all? It's really weird. I don't really understand it. I did very much enjoy level 3 though. It's densely packed with things to do, meaning you won't be running around too long before finding another pagey to work towards. Level 4, on the other hand, can drink piss out of my ass. It's this gigantic casino where you'll have to do all these dumb mini-games for tokens that you'll trade in for pages. You'll have to play these stupid slot machines again and again and again and stop. There's also these physics golf game things where you gotta gotta push the ball in the hole, and, you know, there's only so much Unity's physics engine can do, so have fun with this. It's not fun. Look at all of this empty space. The level's freaking gigantic, and there's hardly anything here. What's the point of this? Level 5 is also pretty forgettable. It's some space stage. You can fly at this point. The controls kind of suck dick, though. I mean, look, I'm actually trying as hard as I can to collect these feathers. I cannot do it. It's way too floaty. It's funny because you remember when I said the controls were excellent? Yeah, they are excellent when you're just, like, running and jumping, but the second it becomes anything else, like flying or swimming or sliding, it becomes floaty and hard to maneuver. Swimming's not, like, too bad, but it's definitely looser than I'd prefer. Anything else, like flying or sliding, is always hard to get a handle on. There's this one slide in the hub world that took me, like, 17 tries to get. I mean, the controls just suck for anything different than normal. But, yeah, those are my very mixed feelings about Yooka-Laylee. I mean, when it's good, it is great. It's that classic platforming and exploration you grew up with and loved as a kid. When it's not, it sucks mondo dick. I mean, like, you just, occasionally now and then, you just get this mini game or, like, this objective that's just not fun to do at all. It's definitely trying to be a tribute to platformers of old, but in doing that, it still suffers from a lot of the same problems those games had. Looking back on Vex and Tai, I think these are great examples. Fun games, but they're not always fun games. There's mounds of occasional shitty game design between the fun parts. Don't get me wrong, though, it's easily a much better game than Tai or Vex. I mean, it doesn't feel nearly as dated as those games. It's just that I wish developers like this tried to learn more than from just Banjo-Kazooie. You can learn a lot from games that do things poorly instead of only learning from games that do things well. If you want to make a great platformer, don't only play good platformers. Play bad platformers. Find out what makes a game bad so you can avoid those kinds of game design choices as well. Like I said earlier, Yooka-Laylee does have a lot of great game design, and it's all stuff that was present in Banjo-Kazooie. You can tell that these guys, after all these years, they still get it. They still know that sort of great gaming, platforming ideology, but I think they really should have tried to learn from the mistakes of companies that were making platformers in the early 2000s. Companies like Chrome Studios, because in failing to learn from those mistakes, Playtonic unfortunately makes those same mistakes. Yooka-Laylee is a classic platformer in every sense of the word. And I really do mean every sense of the word. With the classic platformer fun comes the classic platformer bullshit, and Yooka-Laylee is unfortunately packed to the brim with it. A lot of it just stems from trying to add variety through these drastic changes in gameplay. I mean, platforming and puzzle solving is what these guys know best, and they're so eager to stray away from that again and again, and I just find that so mind-boggling. I feel Yooka-Laylee would have been a much better game if it was a more focused experience. It wasn't so ready to experiment and try things that they didn't know were going to work. Not that experimenting is wrong, it's just that when I buy a platformer, I want a platform. I don't want to play these cruddy mini games. I don't want to do kart racing missions. I want to do what I signed up for. And focusing on just that, you could have made such a better game. I mean, it's more or less a game from 2004 with 2017 graphics, and I mean that's great. I mean, it's classic platforming action. If you like games from like 2003, I know I do, you're bound to at least kinda like Yooka-Laylee, but the problem with that is that they don't have any sort of modern twist or like updated game design ideas. I don't know, it just really kinda already feels dated in that sense. In the end, I did enjoy myself though, you know, just not the entire time. I can at least say if you are a fan of Banjo-Kazooie, you're guaranteed to at least somewhat like Yooka-Laylee. You just gotta be prepared to trudge through the mud every now and then. Honestly, Yooka-Laylee seems more like a love letter to those B-grade platformers of the early 2000s, rather than it seems like a tribute to those legendary platformers of the late 90s. And, you know, if you're into those B-grade platformers like Tai the Tasmanian Tiger, like I am, I'd say go for it. Though probably what you're thinking right now is it worth full price? And I'll put it this way. I'd pay as much for Yooka-Laylee as I'd pay for a B-grade platformer. How much does that usually run me? $6 to $12 on eBay.